The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 angry fists as Marcus Whitmore stood beside his disabled Bugatti Chiron, designer shoes soaking in a puddle that reflected his scowling face. At 32, he'd built an empire in tech investments, amassed a fortune that could buy small countries, and cultivated an ego to match. Now, stranded on a forgotten highway outside Louisville, Kentucky, his carefully constructed world of control was crumbling with each passing minute. "Useless piece of European garbage," he muttered, kicking the tire with enough force to send pain shooting through his foot. His phone showed no signal naturally. The universe seemed determined to humble him tonight. And Marcus Whitmore didn't do humble. That's when he saw her, a figure emerging from the darkness, pushing an ancient bicycle with a basket full of what looked like groceries. She was perhaps in her mid-20s, wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit stained with oil and life, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Everything about her screamed ordinary, and Marcus had spent his entire adult life avoiding ordinary. "Car trouble," she called out, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed impossible given the miserable weather. "Obviously," Marcus snapped, then caught himself. He needed help after all. "It just died. Won't even turn over. I've called every service in a 50-mile radius, but apparently no one works past 9 on a Thursday." The woman propped her bicycle against a fence post and approached, seemingly unbothered by the rain. "Mind if I take a look?" Marcus almost laughed. This was a $3 million vehicle, a masterpiece of engineering, that required specialized diagnostics equipment and factory-trained technicians. What could this small-town girl possibly do? But desperation made him step aside. "Be my guest. But I'm telling you, this isn't something you fix with duct tape and hope." She ignored his condescension, popping the hood with practiced ease. Marcus watched her lean in, her hands moving with surprising confidence across the engine. She pulled out her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the mechanical maze beneath. "Your flux capacitor's probably shot," she said without looking up. "My what?" Marcus moved closer despite himself. "Just kidding. Seeing if you were paying attention." She glanced at him with a slight smile. "But seriously, I think I see the problem. Your battery terminal's corroded, and there's a loose connection to your alternator. You've also got a blown fuse in your electrical system. Probably from hitting that pothole back there. I saw you splash through it about 2 miles back when I was biking home." Marcus stared at her, reassessing. "How did you—" "My dad owned a garage. Grew up rebuilding engines before. I could do long division." She was already pulling tools from her bicycle. Basket tools, not groceries as he'd assumed. "I work at Patterson's Auto now, just finished the late shift." Something about her matter-of-fact competence irritated him, pricked at his pride. Here was someone who should have been impressed by him, awed by his wealth, intimidated by his success. Instead, she was treating his prized possession like any other broken-down vehicle. "Look," Marcus heard himself say, his voice dripping with the arrogance that had served him so well in boardrooms. "I appreciate the gesture, but this is a Bugatti Chiron. It's not like the clunkers you're used to working on. There's probably thousands of dollars in damage." She straightened, meeting his eyes with a directness that made him uncomfortable. The rain had plastered her hair to her face, but her gaze was steady, unbothered. "You're right. It's not what I usually work on. Most of my customers are decent people who say thank you when someone tries to help them in the rain." The rebuke landed like a slap. Marcus felt heat rise to his face, an unfamiliar sensation. When was the last time someone had called him out? When was the last time he'd allowed anyone close enough to do so? "I didn't mean—" he started, but she was already turning back to the engine. "Forget it. I should get home anyway. Hope you get it sorted." She began packing her tools. Panic fluttered in Marcus's chest, which made no sense. He'd been in tougher spots than this. He'd survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, betrayals by business partners. Yet watching this stranger walk away felt inexplicably like failure. "Wait." The word came out rougher than intended. "I'm sorry. That was—" "I was an ass. You're trying to help, and I'm being ungrateful." The apology felt foreign in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten he knew. "Please, if you can actually fix it, I'll marry you." He meant it as a joke, a way to lighten the tension his behavior had created. But she turned back, and something flickered across her face, Not offense, not amusement, but something deeper, sadder. Don't make promises you don't mean, Mr. Whitmore. His surprise must have shown because she nodded toward the cars, registration visible through the windshield. Besides, marriage isn't something you offer to strangers as payment. It's supposed to mean something. She was right, of course. Marcus's own parents had divorced before he was 10, both too busy building their own empires to build a family. He'd been married once, briefly, to a woman who'd loved his portfolio more than his person. The split had been clean, emotionless, like dissolving a bad business partnership. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I don't know why I said that." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll make you a deal. I'll fix your car, and you give $100 to St. Catherine's Food Bank. They're trying to raise money for new refrigeration units." "100? That's it?" Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracting a black card. "I'll give them 10,000. "That's generous, but not the point." She was back at the engine now, working quickly despite the rain. The point is doing something because it's right, not because the amount impresses people. My mom volunteers there 3 days a week. She always says the widow's mite meant more than the rich man's surplus. Marcus watched her work in silence, feeling something shift inside him. She was tightening connections, replacing the blown fuse with one from her toolkit, cleaning corrosion with practiced efficiency. It struck him that he had no idea what her name was. This woman who was saving his evening without asking for anything in return. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "And you are?" Sarah Chen." She wiped her hands on a rag. "Okay, try starting it now." He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and held his breath. For a moment, nothing. Then, like a miracle or perhaps just the result of skill and kindness, the engine roared to life, that distinctive Bugatti growl filling the night air. Marcus sat there, rain drumming on the roof, expensive engine purring, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine gratitude. He stepped out to find Sarah already loading her tools back into her bicycle basket. "Sarah, wait. Seriously, how much do I owe you? I told you. $100 to St. Catherine's. At least let me drive you home. Your bike will fit in the trunk, probably." She shook her head, smiling now, a real smile that transformed her rain-soaked face. "It's only a mile. I like the ride, even in the rain. Gives me time to think." "Then let me ask you something." Marcus surprised himself again. "Why? Why help someone who was rude to you, who looked down on you?" Sarah considered the question, then shrugged. "My dad used to say that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Maybe you were having a bad day. Maybe you're always like this. Either way, leaving you stranded wouldn't have made me feel better, or you feel worse in any way that matters. Sometimes being kind costs us nothing and means everything." She pushed off on her bicycle, and Marcus watched her go, taillights disappearing into the rain. He stood there longer than necessary, letting the water soak through his expensive jacket, feeling more awake than he had in months. The next day, Marcus didn't just send money to St. Catherine's Food Bank. He showed up in person with a check that would cover not just refrigeration units, but a complete facility upgrade. He met Sarah's mother, a tiny woman with her daughter's same kind eyes, who cried when she saw the amount and insisted on giving him a tour of their operation. He saw families lining up for food, working parents who couldn't quite make ends meet, elderly people stretching fixed incomes, children who didn't understand why there wasn't always enough. He saw volunteers like Sarah's mother giving their time without recognition or reward. He saw need and dignity existing simultaneously, and something in his carefully constructed worldview cracked open. Marcus kept coming back, first weekly, then almost daily. He started a foundation, hired Sarah to help run the automotive training program for unemployed workers. He learned the names of the families, heard their stories, and slowly began understanding what Sarah had tried to tell him that rainy night, that wealth without compassion was just accumulated numbers, that success without service was an echo chamber of emptiness. 6 months later, on another rainy Thursday, Marcus found himself back at Patterson's Auto, this time deliberately. Sarah looked up from under the hood of a Honda Civic, surprise and something else, pleasure maybe, crossing her face. "Fancy seeing you here, Mr. Whitmore. The Bugatti giving you trouble again?" "No, actually, I was wondering if you'd have dinner with me." Not because you fixed my car, not as payment or gratitude, but because, he paused, searching for honesty, because you fixed something else that night. Something I didn't know was broken. Sarah set down her wrench, studying him with that same direct gaze that had unsettled him months ago. Now it felt like coming home. Are you going to be arrogant and insufferable? Probably sometimes. Old habits die hard. Are you going to make stupid jokes about marriage? Marcus smiled. Not until I actually mean it. She wiped her hands, considering, then nodded. Okay, Marcus Whitmore, let's see if you're as good at fixing yourself as I was at fixing your car. They walked out together into the evening light, and Marcus realized that the best things in life couldn't be bought, controlled, or impressed into existence. Sometimes they arrived on a bicycle in the rain, carrying tools and wisdom, asking for nothing but offering everything. Sometimes being broken down was the only way to find the road home. And sometimes, just sometimes, the arrogant millionaire learned that the person who could truly fix him was never going to be impressed by his money anyway.